Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of Behold the Savior. This week we're going to continue our series on the seventh-day Sabbath. Last time we tracked through 20 centuries of Sabbath keeping, and we've seen that God has maintained a remnant group of people that would be faithful to Him throughout all of time, that would maintain and honor all of the 10 commandments, not just 9, but including that fourth commandment to keep the Sabbath day holy. Today we're going to take a look and continue at it to see what it means to us today in our time. Was it only relevant to people of long ago and only to ancient Israel, or does it have relevance to us today? I want to ask you a question as we talk about this also. Do you ever get tired? You ever tired from working all week, nonstop, or dealing with problems all week? Nonstop. We go. We have all technology and all sorts of things to make our life easier, yet we seem to not be getting very much happier or having very much more time on our hands. In fact, it seems to be the quite opposite. This is why Jesus in the Great Invitation says these very powerful words in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. He says, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That's ultimately what Jesus wants for us. That's why He's given us the Sabbath commandment. He knew that we would have the tendency to be workaholics and go. We would have to be commanded to rest. And I wanted to look at the effects of going nonstop have on our body. We're going to take a look at 7 signs that you may be overworked. And let's take a look at the first one. Number 1 is working more than 40 hours per week can make you more likely to drink risky amounts of alcohol. And now we know, of course, that any amount of alcohol is risky, and it's best to drink no alcohol. But those working more than 40 hours a week are more likely to turn towards substances to be able to cope and to be able to chemically force their bodies to relax. So not only with alcohol, but that would certainly include other types of chemicals as well. Number 2 is your productivity stalling. If you've increased your hours without significant results, the longer hours are probably decreasing your productivity. In fact, a Stanford research paper found that people who worked 70 hours per week didn't actually get more done than their peers who worked 56 hours a week. I remember I was in a job one time, and this was before I was in ministry, and I said, hey, can we do 4 10-hour days and we can get the same amount of time done in a shorter period of time? And turns out that that's not the healthiest thing to do. And we continue to see it in daytime fatigue. Going nonstop all day makes it hard to quiet your mind at bedtime. And how many of you have a hard time falling asleep at night? You know, you go, and you're dealing with problems all day long, putting out fires and dealing with situations and work, and then you got to get home, then you work, and then you finally get to where you can stop at night and you begin to close your eyes, but your mind is going over, it's racing, it's rehearsing all of the things from the day, it's rehearsing all of the things you have to do tomorrow, and it's hard to just get your mind to quiet down. Overworking ourselves is actually giving us daytime fatigue. Of course, losing sleep at night equals being tired during the day. Poor sleep can not only make you grumpy, it can lead to increased risk in chronic conditions like type 2 diabetes. Let's talk about depression a little bit. Working too much can take a toll on your mental health. There's an organization called Plus One, PLOS1, and they have found that those working 11 hours per day are more likely to battle depression than those working 8 hours a day. And let's continue to the next one here. Even dealing with your heart working overtime, the physical effects of working overtime. Work stress can release the hormone cortisol, which is hard on your heart and can increase risk of stroke, coronary artery disease, and type 2 diabetes, and even cancer. The devil has been so calculating to get us to go nonstop. We are literally working ourselves to death. And maybe you have a pain in the neck or a pain in the back. And common signs of stress for women, pain tends to show up in the neck. So ladies, mothers out there, when your kid's bothering you and whining and you say, hey, stop being such a pain in the neck. Literally, it's a pain in the neck. The stress with ladies tends to show up in pain manifested in the neck, and with guys, it tends to be manifested in lower back pain. And the overworking ourselves is certainly taking its physical toll. Number 7, relationships are taking a hit, and this is probably the most severe of them, because this not only affects you overworking, it affects those around you as well. Even if you have time for relationships, the stress and fatigue and depression that you're experiencing due to work may take a toll on them as well. And work can stick with you long after you've clocked out, and especially if you're self-employed, you never really get to clock out. Relationships often take a hit. There is help for it, though. There's an antidote. But it makes sense why the devil would do this. It makes sense that he would rise up an institution that would intend to change times and laws that the prophet Daniel prophesied about. Now, there's only one law that deals with time, and that is the seventh-day Sabbath. The devil has been attacking this fourth commandment to try to kill you. Not so you can get more done, not so you can have more fun, but so he can kill you. It makes good sense why he would attack this particular commandment. And Leviticus 23:32 tells us that the Sabbath begins at sunset on Friday evening. Let me tell you, after a long week of work, I'm looking forward to the sun setting on Friday evening. And don't get me wrong, I love the summer months. I love the longer hours. You can get more done. You can enjoy more time. But I tell you, Friday night, and I'm begging for the sun to go down, because even mentally seeing that sun go down, there's something about stepping into the rest, the peace that God has to offer for you. And it makes good sense why he would have to say, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This is a command to the Israelites who were coming from straight out of Egypt, out of Egyptian bondage, and they had maintained the seventh-day Sabbath since the Jews were born. Even before that, at creation, before there were any Jews. And at Mount Sinai, as they're traveling through the wilderness, God stops and he says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Remember the Sabbath, that one that you kept all throughout your generations, the one that was instituted even before there were any Jews. Remember that day that you began to forget in your Egyptian bondage. Remember that day to keep it holy. Also, he's looking forward in history down to our time. How did he know that it's the one commandment much of the world would forget? He commands us to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 9, it says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. See, this command it's not only a command to rest, it's a command to work. It's a command to be productive members of society 6 days a week and rest of the seventh day. Now, I understand not everybody can go and punch in and clock in at the factory or the warehouse every day of the week. And, there's age issues and physical limitations, and some people can't work and are on relief or assistance. That doesn't mean you can't be productive to the world, no matter what your situation is. I say this in a Bible study, and someone always says, what if you're quadriplegic or something? And I say, I'm sure even quadriplegics can pray. Can speak, can call, can do something. You can be a benefit to society. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. This is a command not only for the Jews, not only for man, not only for woman, also it's for cattle. How many of you have maybe been talking about this? Maybe you said it. Well, that Sabbath, that's for the Jews. How many Jewish cows do you know? You know of any cows walking around putting their yarmulke on, make sure they keep all the festivals and everything? God has given the Sabbath for everybody, built it into the DNA. We need this day to rest and step away from the world. Now, science tries to say that we instituted this 7-day cycle, that we got it from Babylon, and it's been a cultural thing. But Babylon's magic mystical number was 6, not 7. And 7 we get straight from creation. There's a new science called chronobiology that tracks that our bodies operate best on a 7-day cycle, not only in humans, but also in plants and animals as well. We need the rest. And here, let's take a look at it again. And in it, you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. And somebody always picks out to me, they say, well, what about the wife or the mother? It doesn't mention anything about them at all. And I say, well, it does. It talks about the servant. And but it's for everybody. Exodus chapter 20, verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. This is a celebration. It's a birthday that we get to celebrate of the world and God's creative power every single week. And the command continues, therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. You know what we need to do in life? We need to take a break. We need to stop, go up to the mountaintop, go out into the country, step away from the world a little bit, step into that presence with God, decompress, and allow that time to be. Now, we communicate to God all the time, but there's something about stepping into the Sabbath hours. You get a special Sabbath blessing from doing it. Now, a lot of times people wonder, well, what can I do or what can't I do on the Sabbath? And I'm not going to give you a list of do this or don't do that. We can become very, very legalistic. There are principles that we want to apply, though. And for instance, many people wonder, well, is it okay to go out to eat on the Sabbath? And after all, we're supposed to have a break, and wouldn't it be okay to just go to church and then go out to eat? Now, would it be appropriate, would it be responsible for you to rest and then go out and force somebody else or make somebody else work for you? And that wouldn't be a very good Christian thing to do. And that person, they deserve to rest also. But you say, well, they're going to be there anyway. And, they may be there anyway, but they don't have to be there because of me or because of you. So probably if we want to serve God the best we can, it would not include going out to eat on the Sabbath. My mother, she's in sales, and I loved my mother very, very much. And when I began to learn about the Sabbath, I told her these things and shared with her. And, we're in church on the Sabbath, and we don't go and do all these other things. It's a break from the world. I can do those things 6 days a week. I don't have to do it now. It's a break from all those things. She looked at me and said, well, how do you eat? I said, it's okay to eat on the Sabbath. I don't have to have somebody else making my food for me. In fact, my wife, she's the one that does the cooking in the house. For all of our health's sake, she does the cooking. She deserves a break too. So Friday night, she prepares the meal, and that way it's ready for Sabbath. And then you just put it in the oven, warm it up, and it's a wonderful time. It's very good food, easy to do when we plan for it. I had a message from somebody one time. And let me tell you a little backstory on this. This lady, whenever I met her, she had some health challenges. In fact, when I knocked on her door, rang the doorbell for the very first time, she had a challenge getting up and coming to the door, and the health was not good. We began studying the Bible together, and she began to see the wonderful things that the Bible has and the health principles that the Bible has in store for us, which the Sabbath is a health principle. And she began to put these things into action, and her life began to change. Her family relationships started to strengthen and grow. Her body became stronger, healthier, and eventually she was going out door to door right beside me for hours at a time. She went from not being able to hardly be able to cross the room to going out door to door. She was excited about her health, and she asked me the question. She messaged me one day and says, hey, should I exercise on the Sabbath? And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do or what not to do. You want to apply the principles. That's between you and God. And I said, now, when you exercise, what's going through your mind? Are you thinking about calories and distance and reps and how many times I do this and that? Your focus is on burning calories, staying fit and doing. And exercise is good, but that may be a good time to actually give your body a rest. In fact, science tells us now that your strength, the health is done in the rest time. Your body, the muscle rebuilding is done in the downtime. You're not doing your body any good by exercising 7 days a week. It physically needs a break. And I said, there are a lot of wonderful things that you can do on the Sabbath, and that doesn't mean that you have to stay inside, close the blinds and everything, sit on your sofa and just wait it out 24 hours. And we're going to take a look at some other things that go along with that also. And people wonder, well, didn't Jesus work on the Sabbath? And I was at one of my jobs one time, this is before I was in ministry, and I don't even remember how it came up. We were talking about the Sabbath, and one of the coworkers said, Jesus, he kind of did away with all of that when he worked on the Sabbath, didn't he? And I said, well, that's an interesting point. Let's think about this a little bit. What did Jesus do for a living? He said he was a carpenter. I said, that's right. If the society then was the same as it is today, probably followed in his father's footsteps, Jesus was probably a carpenter. And I said, you'll find him healing on the Sabbath, but you'll never find him in the carpenter's shop on the Sabbath. But he did go out of his way, it seems, to do some miracles on the Sabbath. In fact, you know how many miracles he did on the Sabbath? Take a guess. Throw a number out there. How many miracles do you think Jesus did on the Sabbath? He did 7 miracles on the 7th day, and 7 seems to be the number of perfection and completeness. See, he was trained. He needed to explain to the religious leaders, he needed to show them how to keep the Sabbath. How can we best glorify and honor God even through what we do on the Sabbath? Because they had sort of a twisted, very legalistic view of the Sabbath. It became a burden. And he healed some people. And one story goes like this. Jesus went to eat at the ruler of a Pharisee's house to eat bread. There was a man who had dropsy, and Jesus asked if it's lawful to heal on the Sabbath. And they sat there silent. And Jesus says, which of you, having a donkey or an ox that has fallen into a pit, will not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day? So he did leave some parameters for emergency work that needs to be done on the Sabbath. For example, policemen. We need police officers operating all of the time. And in fact, I was doing Bible studies once with a police officer. He became convicted of the Sabbath, but he had a real problem. He understood that law enforcement needs to happen 24/7. But he also knew that he really needed to be in worshiping God and honoring the Sabbath on that 7th day on Saturday. So he asked me, what do I do? And I told him, well, there are other people in the same situation as you. Doctors, nurses. If there's a car accident, you certainly don't want until the sun goes down, the Sabbath's over, and then the fire department shows up and take care of you. No, you need help right then and there. He said, what you can do is, you can request off on the Sabbath. You want to keep the Sabbath, but I'm guessing probably the other people there don't. So you can request off, or possibly you could be asked to be in a rotation. Maybe you could work one Sabbath a month or every other or something like that in the instance of emergency work. And if that's not possible, I said, there are many people I know that if they're in healthcare or something, they have to be there to, people get sick on the Sabbath. Oftentimes they will donate the money they make that day to the church or to some cause of God. That way, it's not a work of self-serving, selfish gain. It's a work of ministry that they've turned it into. And we want to be careful also not to turn that into an excuse. Oh, well, I'm a doctor or nurse or something, so the Sabbath doesn't apply to me. No, it still applies to you. We still want to do the best that we can to honor God. And we want to be sure that we don't take the pulling the ox out of the ditch. If you've got emergencies every single week, then if you're pulling that ox out of the ditch every single week, then you got a problem with that ox. You need to get a new ox, put the poor ox down, or fill in that ditch or something. Don't make provision to be able to break God's commandment and then try to justify it every single week. We want to do the best that we can to follow God. Now, again, that's in emergency work, not regular civilian secular work. You certainly want to be able to follow God right now, all the time on that. After all, Jesus did say in Matthew 12:12, "It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." And certainly that applies to our law enforcement, military, and that type of people. Let's talk about a different type of Sabbath briefly here also. The word Sabbath, it means a break. It means a rest. And, we live in a very technologically driven time. How often do you see zombies walking around on their phone looking down all the time? How people don't run into walls on their phones, it's beyond me. And you can't go to a restaurant without seeing people, instead of talking face to face, they're on their phones or watching a TV that's at a restaurant. Everybody seems to be very saturated with technology. I want to challenge you to take a Sabbath, a technology Sabbath, a tech Sabbath. Take a break from it. We did this in our family, and we did a week, no technology. Doing what I do, I get some emergency calls, so I had to have access to that, but no TV, no internet, nothing that we didn't have to do. And you know what? It was a blessing. We spent more time together, and it was a wonderful blessing. I want to encourage you to try it. Here's some of the physical effects of completely saturating yourself with technology all the time. Here you see on your screen there something interesting. Here you see somebody bending their head down at a 15-degree angle looking at their phone. A 15 degrees of bending your head is equal to 27 pounds of force on your neck. Bending your head down at 30 degrees is the equivalent of 40 pounds of pressure on your neck. And you get the idea, but this is probably the angle here that most of us are looking at our devices, 60 degrees. That's the equivalent of 60 pounds of pressure on your neck. And it's bad for the spine. People are having back problems, neck problems because of technology. And it's actually prematurely aging the neck too. People are developing wrinkles prematurely, and it's very, very bad. What we need is a break. We need to take a Sabbath even from technology sometimes. Let's continue here. So how do you do it? Some people ask, well, I see the principle of the Sabbath, I see the obvious health benefits, but how in the world do you do it? How do I do it? Well, let's take a look at it here. In the death and crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, we see something interesting. We see the preparation day. Jesus died on the preparation day, what we would call Friday. Why is it called the preparation day? Again, in the Bible, you're not going to find Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You're going to find first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, preparation day, and the Sabbath. This is the day that the Jews planned for the Sabbath. Actually, all throughout the week, they looked forward to it and they planned how they could spend that special time with God. If you were going out on some hot date or something, you would plan for it ahead of time, making sure your clothes are laid out, making sure, everything's done ahead of time so you can have that special uninterrupted time with that person. What more important date is there than a date with God? So if we begin to plan for the Sabbath, which ultimately is planning to spend time with God, it becomes very, very easy. Take advantage of that preparation day. That would be a good day to, make sure the car's filled up, make sure the house is cleaned, even try to make sure your yard work is done. That way when you go out back and sit outside and you want to enjoy the beautiful nature that God's given us, you're not looking at, a raggedy yard and everything and just think, oh man, I got to do that and that and that. Try to get it all done on the preparation day. That's why God's given it to us, so we want to plan to have as much time uninterrupted with God as possible. And some may say, well, I can't afford to keep the Sabbath. You can do it because you're a pastor, but I can't afford to keep the Sabbath. And let me tell you something. I am a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Very proud to be able to do that. Sabbath is often the busiest day of my week. Now, I work all the other days, but on the Sabbath, I'm oftentimes in multiple churches preaching. Sometimes I do seminars in the evening on top of that, and sometimes I do visitations and anointings. There's many things. but it's different. It's a loving service for God, and it's different than being in regular service all throughout the week. But the question is, I can't afford to keep the Sabbath, and I would say to you, you can't afford not to keep the Sabbath. There was somebody that owned a barber shop one time. They were really struggling with this. They knew what the Bible says about the Sabbath. They knew what they should be doing, but they didn't see how they could possibly do it. Owned the barber shop, and the challenge was this: well, should I take off on Saturday and have my employees work for me? But that doesn't really seem right, because the Bible says that even your servants should not be working on the Sabbath, even the stranger within your gates. So that didn't work. So this person stepped out in faith. They closed the barber shop on Saturday, on Sabbath. And they opened it up the next week, and what happened? They began to be so busy, so overwhelmed and blessed, they had to open up a second barbershop to handle all of the business. When we step out in faith for God, we untie God's hands to be able to bless us, because we're ready to receive those blessings that we cheat ourselves out of otherwise. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 says this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path." See, Sabbath helps to keep us healthy. Sabbath is an act of worship. It's an act of rest. It's an act of faith. No wonder the devil wants to steal this special Sabbath day's blessing for you. No wonder the devil would raise up an institution prophesied in Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 that would intend to change times and law. And you may be wondering by now, well, my goodness, well, what can I do on the Sabbath? Well, there's many wonderful things that you can do on the Sabbath. Spend time in nature. You remember the person that asked me about exercising in nature? You know, it's very appropriate to go out for a nice walk in nature and enjoy the birds that God created and flowers. Talk about it with your family or friends, or even just by yourself. The Sabbath is an appropriate time to go share the gospel with somebody. Go minister to somebody. Find out who can't go to church, shut in, and go visit them. Go to the nursing home, minister to. Find ways to be a blessing and deliver the gospel to somebody else. That's really the best way that you can keep the Sabbath as well. Now, don't forget to take that rest also. And you know what? Enjoy the Sabbath while you can. We here in the United States of America anyway, we still live in a relatively free country. We have the freedom to be able to worship on the Sabbath as we desire. But that freedom may not always be there. Next time we're going to take a look at what the Bible says about the future. And there's something called blue laws that regulate what can and can't take place on certain days. And they may be coming. Actually, they're not coming. They're already here. Check back with us next time, and we're going to talk more about that. But until then, enjoy the Sabbath. Thank you, and God bless.